versus you. It's you 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 versus you. Time to clear your mental, everything you've been through. Looking in the mirror like you're the one with the issues. You against yourself, feel like you against the world. Internally battling all of the trauma, you struggle to manage it. Gotta seek help for the damages. It's you versus you, now go and handle it. It's you versus you, let's get ahead of it. It's you versus you, let's clear our heads of it. I'm so good now, I feel good now. The baggage put down, just let me live. Just let me live. Now my mind's clear. It's you versus you. It's you versus you. It's you versus you. It's you versus you.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Saquon. I'd like to welcome everyone back to a fresh episode of the You versus You podcast. Today's episode is entitled Imposter Syndrome. And by definition, imposter syndrome is a psychological pattern where people doubt their accomplishments. Better yet, feel like they are unworthy of their accomplishments and always feel like they're living in a constant fear that someone will ultimately discover their unworthiness. And we're going to talk about some of the tentacles of imposter syndrome that may pop up, like survivor's guilt, spotlight syndrome, so on and so forth. But prior to getting into the conversation, I just want to put forth a disclaimer. I've done this at various times throughout production, but I feel like it's appropriate to do it again. I am not a clinical psychologist, nor am I a licensed practitioner. The thoughts and views expressed here are anecdotal in nature. In fact, it's the premise of me versus everyone who's involved with the podcast is that if viewers can glean insight and inspiration from it, and ultimately should they decide that the need is there, feel comfortable with actually seeking out their own professional licensed practitioner and or therapist to at least have a 15-minute consultation. So that's the premise. And with that being said, let's get right into it. I'm excited because I have a great guest. I actually met him, my friend, kindred spirit, in dance class. He's an amazing dancer. Um, my buddy Kyle Kinnaman. What's up, man?
Hey man, good to see you.
How are you? Great to see you.
Fantastic.
Yeah?
Doing well.
You were cutting up last night, man.
I'm not trying to
And
be.
you were giving me shit about not dancing. I danced. You can ask anybody there. I danced 16 and three-quarter time.
I don't want to know about that extra quarter you missed out.
Please. It's an HR
I
violation, I promise.
had a few of those.
Ooh, yeah. Those are the
Trying to
best
stay
ones.
off the creepy list, you know.
Those are the best ones to have, buddy. You better believe it. Yeah, man. So again, I really, really, really appreciate your time here today, man. So tell us and ultimately, well, tell me and ultimately the viewership
Sure.
about yourself, man.
So let's kick right into the imposter syndrome. Let's just go right into it.
You better believe it.
So I'm a divorced dad of three, software engineer, moved over to the sales and business side. I run a lot of large programs of work. I've had a very, um, I would say, distinguished career that I don't always feel has been that way. I've also had the opportunity to be a professional musician and to do a lot of interesting work and travel. So I feel like I've got a very balanced and maybe even a nuanced take on the world and life. And I finally realize I'm at a place where I'm surrounded by people that love me and care about me and push me to be better. And I feel warm in that respect for maybe the first time ever. And so, yeah, that's yeah, not much else to say.
Gotcha, man. All of that sounds fascinating to me. I'd like to backtrack just a tad bit here. So you were having a flourishing career
Mhm.
as a software engineer, and then that sort of took a turn around about the COVID-19 time frame. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
So I was an engineer from way back in the dark days, back in the mid 90s. And I got to a point where I was just not happy with trying to find technical solutions to problems. And I was given the opportunity to come over and lead some teams and work with clients and, major banks, companies that you've heard of. And I took it, right? Just looked at it, this is my evolution and why not? I found out I was very good at leading people, basically giving the clients what they needed and managing the teams, the programs of work. And I got to a point where I was offered a sales role. I felt a little bit out of my comfort there because it just didn't feel like me. And then COVID hit and everything kind of fell apart. I went through, I would say, the easiest divorce anyone ever went through, which is still not easy, if you know what I mean. I mean, it's one of those things that everybody's case is different, but I knew that it was time to go and move forward very quickly. All my concern was really just what can I do that's going to best set up a life for my kids where they can be successful, they can be healthy and happy. And since then, I won't say I took anything on the chin, but I could have set myself up for more success and realized that as I grow into whatever comes next, I don't have to stay on the same path. And so that's where I am right now, is kind of growing out my hair and reframing, taking some dance classes and trying to, I'm not going to say get in touch with this other side of myself, but mate personal side of me with the business side of me and see what I can build that goes forward to give me the next leg of my journey. I guess yeah, that's it.
Absolutely. So during that transitional period, would you say that there was a bit of not even crisis of identity, but challenge with the current identity, and then maybe shifting over to finding a new identity, maybe some reluctance in there, some challenge, some fear,
Yep.
so on?
Yeah. So again, I spent 20 odd years crafting this identity around solving hard technical challenges, and then I was asked to move over to business and human, like the human side of things. I did well with that, and then COVID kind of shut everybody down. But now I'm
Right.
adapting to being divorced. I'm adapting to living on my own, a new partner at that time, and figuring out what I want to be and how I want to envision and not feeling like I've failed after 20 odd years of those things. I mean, I failed out of college twice. I'm not averse to failure. I'm not afraid to talk about it because I feel it's always an opportunity for growth and for the ability for people to expand beyond themselves, but you have to be willing to accept the metamorphosis. And so I looked at that kind of in situ and just said, what do I need to do to change? Like I can't stay where I am. I'm in a chrysalis right now. I'm no longer I'm no longer a little worm, but I don't know if I'm going to be a butterfly or a moth or just some hideous creature. But I got to move forward.
Absolutely.
And that sort of constant adaptation has done well for me throughout my life, whether that's learning a new software language or adapting to a new, human resources nonsense or whatever that is. But it's especially as a parent, it's always giving you additional context for how you shape little humans, right? But the interesting part of it is I've never felt like a failure. I've just never felt like I've lived up to the potential that so many people told me that I had. And that's where, you talk about imposter syndrome. There's a lot to unpack and I'll let you guide it, but I feel like this change is never going to end. And there's just a constant cycle of growth, rebirth, and development that needs to happen. And right now, I'm just kind of in that quiet, I guess they call it the lonely chapter, where I'm moving from who I was into who I will be. And I'm finding the relationships, the parts of myself that I can carve away and move into my next manifestation of self.
Absolutely. Yeah, just to piggyback off of what you were talking about, yeah, divorce is certainly one of the most difficult things that I had to endure. Me, like you, my divorce with my wife was pretty amicable. We didn't
Hmm.
involve attorneys or anything like that. We didn't have children. We didn't have a ton of assets that we needed to divide. So I think, like you, it was, if I can dare say, painstakingly easy,
Yes.
right? But still, there's a lot of catharsis that happens in that moment, right? So now with you, you dealt with that, and then you're shifting careers as a result of COVID. But you also mentioned to me that even during that time prior to that, you had this feeling of worthlessness, attaching worth to money. You felt like you were amazing at building teams, but you weren't necessarily serving yourself and serving others. I'd like for you to unpack that a bit, please.
Exactly. So I went from a place where, my value was my intellectual capital. And that's more of what can I build? What can I envision? What can I design? And then it became how can I manage this team? How can I, recruit, retain and employ the right people to do big things and to
Right.
be laser focused about what that is. And some of that comes from just learning the management capabilities, learning what's really in the contract, learning when to say no to a company that's in the Fortune 10, right? And look at them right in the eye and say, that's not a contract. We're not doing that. I got to protect my people. So there's a lot of that that happens, but the identity shift from, not just individual contributor to manager to leader to consultant, all those things. I've done that shift a couple times, and now I'm back to individual contributor role, right? In my mind, where I'm trying to build something for myself that encompasses all of those things, but I have to start with the technology. I have to start with the human element for how those things work. It's The shift was never around what can I do. It was always what can I encourage and foster. And I think a lot of that was taking, I mean, I don't want to sound selfless, but taking the bigger approach of I've sat in the chair where these people sit and trying to understand what it is that they need and what their motivations are and realize their motivations may be different than mine. At the end of the day, everybody wants to do good work. They want to go home. They want to, hug their kids or, have a nice meal or whatever their thing is and just enjoy their life. And it doesn't need to be all encompassing. So it still was problem solving, whether that was, a piece of technology or, retrofitting a schedule that worked for everybody, or whether that was, trying to go forth and build something for a client. The challenge changed, but that sense of what is my purpose in this always felt a little bit lacking because I never really looked at it as I'm doing my best work here. I'm just doing something that supports others, and that's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being on the stage crew, right? There's still an essential part of that of the performance, the production. But I'm not saying that I wanted to be out front on the stage, but sometimes you want a little bit of that, a little taste of that life, right? You want to feel like what you're doing is more consequential than the hours that you put into it. And I felt like for so many years, I chased the paycheck, built the big house, had the nice car, had all the things that mattered. And when all those things are suddenly gone and it's just you in a hotel room at 3 o'clock in the morning, staring at a spreadsheet, you start to go, what the fuck am I doing? And I mean, that's the reality of it. It's like, your life is your time. It's a single player game. You set your own rules. And I let a lot of those years go by living for other people and not for myself. And I don't regret all of it, but I regret the mentality behind it, which was I'm here to serve others, not I'm here to serve others and love myself at the same time. So it's not that you can't do both, but you have to have a selfishness to a certain extent in order to appreciate who you are as a human being. And I think I kind of put that aside for wife and kids and job and all the million things that we have to do in this modern life. So, I'm learning to overcome some of those things. I don't think it's like you can't go back and fix it, you can't change it, but just to be cognizant and mindful of the fact that I exist and that's okay. It sounds really basic, but some days you just like, how can I be of service to others becomes how can I deprecate or how can I lessen who I am in order to allow others to shine? And at some point, you got to upstage some people and just get your name right out there. And that's what I'm learning very slowly to do. And it's funny how, for me, it's like a reflexive ego thing where there are a lot of people that, they have to tamp their ego down in order to let others be out there. I feel like now I need to pump mine up in order to go out into the world and do the things that I actually feel matter.
Absolutely. And then identifying the source of that a bit, because I remember in speaking with you prior to us
Mhm.
doing this episode, right? Even during your formative years with your friendships, you said that you were never in opposition or in league with your friends, right?
Mhm.
So you would acquiesce in friendships, which was sort of a relinquishing or a denial of identity,
Sure.
right? So sourcing it back to that and then being where you are now, being able to recount those experiences. What's your thought process regarding that?
It's funny the way you just laid that out because I'd not really thought of it in that context. But if I look back and I had to be an external observer to those, foundational relationships, I was present but not necessary, I guess. Like I didn't carve out a niche for myself. I wasn't the class clown. I wasn't the nerd with the glasses and like everybody's, oh, he's got straight A's. I was just kind of there. And I realized that I think this will tie into like the imposter syndrome. I always knew that I had other capacities. I never displayed them for whatever reason because I just felt like being there was acceptable, and maybe it's a little bit of Midwestern, blend in with everybody kind of thing. Like don't stand out, otherwise you get hammered down. But it, to that point, I felt like I never needed to make a statement. Like I don't have any ink. A lot of people walk around with ink on, I love a lot of them that do, and there's some of them I'm like, okay, maybe that's a little bit much for my taste, but you do you, right? I don't feel like I've ever had anything I needed to say, and anything that I needed to put on my body to represent who I am to others. And even like the hair. Now, I didn't do it as a statement. I did it because I got sick and I didn't get a haircut for a couple months, right?
Right.
And it just kept going. And I'd never had long hair, and it kind of became a defining feature over time. I'm learning that the things that define me are not the things that I believe define me. And there's always been a struggle in me, especially in the business world, between the reality of the situation, the perception. Because what I might do, I believe is the right thing to do, but other people will perceive that as me either being arrogant or selfish or, overly egotistical or motivated or whatever. I just look at a situation and I abhor a vacuum, so I want to solve it, right? That's the engineer part of my brain. And I've realized that I've always done that in whatever relationship or group of friends that I'm in. I just kind of fill the vacuum, and I don't bring a particular energy that says I'm gonna drive us this way. It's always been let's support, let's not necessarily nurture because I'm not really that guy, but let's make sure that people get what they need, and then just kind of keep everybody happy and buoyant between. Just kind of float between people. And I always floated between groups. I do the same thing here. I can float between the engineers and salespeople and the client and the management, and I can do all those things. But I never really carved out a niche for myself, and that's what I'm trying to figure out if have I missed something? I'm not thinking that's right or wrong. It's just, know yourself and then figure out what your gaps are. And so that's been the challenge for me the last couple of years is that a strength? Is that a weakness? Is that neither?
Right.
And just acceptance more than anything else.
Gotcha. It's interesting that on the exterior, it would seem like our lives, our upbringing would be in a stark contrast, right? Like you're Midwestern values,
Hmm.
conservative. I'm from the Northeast, upstate New York, inner city living, product of public housing. But I experienced some of that. So, and I talked about this on prior episodes. Like, I had to really like I think that I'm still in the same place that you were in. And with regard to identity, finding myself, so on and so forth, my tribe, my niche, so on and so forth. But in doing that, I sort of self-actualized and I realized, and I used to think that this was a detriment, that, I really don't require much to feel a sense of fulfillment,
Hmm.
particularly in my social groups, right? Like, sort of like you. Like, I can be a chameleon, I can blend in, we can do this thing, we can do that thing. I don't necessarily need to have a say in that. The fellowship, the camaraderie, that was the most important thing. Um, and upon looking at that now, even recently, I still feel like I'm that way inclined,
Hmm.
right? But I think during my formative years, I feel like it did produce crisis and
Hmm.
identity, right?
Yeah.
Particularly when it came to getting to the point to where I wanted to take aim and become something because I never really invested the time to figure out just who the hell I was, right? What makes me tick. I was so concerned with how others tick. And then, in addition to that, I never really felt comfortable. And I think this would be a good segue because I've always been intelligent, right? I always spoke this way, even as a kid.
Yeah.
I always used this level of vernacular, right? This was something that I wouldn't necessarily say that it was rare in my social circles being in the inner city. What I will say is that it was a peculiar thing. And go ahead.
It exists. It's whether or not people accept it and whether they feel comfortable expressing that in their circle, I think. And I was exactly the opposite. I grew up in a college town. My parents are blue collar folk, and they're not stupid by any stretch. They're rather intelligent. They just, they gave me opportunities to be around some really world class people. And to your point, intelligence at a young age can be a great thing when it's nurtured. It can also be a massive liability because people get overconfident, whatever else. I was somewhere in between because I was always told, "Oh, you're smart. You get this. Oh, you read things. You understand them so quickly. How do you remember all this stuff?" And again, I was exposed to people that are world class intellects, and they would look at me like, "Okay, precocious. Yeah, like you get it."
Right.
And they would go home, right? And they'd be like, "Oh, cool, that was great." And then you walk away. I'm like, I have so many questions to ask. So I dove into every book that I could possibly find, and I jumped into every conversation that I could get. And when I got online, it's like the world just like came to my doorstep, and I was constantly reading, constantly growing. But I never learned to manifest that intelligence in a way that fit my community. Like I had a lot of really smart people around me. I mean, I could regale you with people that are on a level of intelligence far beyond what you and I can comprehend. But the question was like, do they understand how to manifest that in the world? Again, they found that peculiar niche that worked for them. I never found a way to express that or express the variances in my personality that allowed me to have a more, I don't know, complex worldview than a lot of folks. And so it was never, you're smart, go do something with it. It was never put upon me like, look, you have a gift that you're wasting. It was more like, you have opportunities to learn, you have opportunities to grow. What do you want to learn? I'm like, all the things. Even now, I would say I want to know everything. I want to experience everything. Like, I'll never know what it's like to give birth, but I want to understand that love and that pain to be able to like empathize with others in the world. Can't do that, but I can read about it. I can listen to those stories. Same sort of thing. I'm never going to understand particle physics, but I can talk to someone that gets it and get enough of that that I get my sound bite, right? Um, but some of that always led to this idea that I'm never going to know enough. I'm never going to be able to demonstrate enough. And that was frustration to me, and it still is. You know, even right now, I'm working trying to get into the AI space, and Google's launched a couple things. I'm like, and others, you know, other competitors have launched some things recently. I'm like, that's exactly what I was working on. Damn it. But at the same time, it leads me to believe I'm on the right track. So it
Absolutely.
validates my thought process, which is good enough, even if it's not, write me a $1 billion check right now, which would be very nice. Um, it's peculiar when you have this sense of capability that goes unmet, right? Or goes unneeded sometimes. Like, well, we didn't need you to do that. We need you to do X. You did X plus 12 things, but you really didn't do X very well. You did all the other things. And that's got me in trouble with partners. Like, I just need you to clean the toilet. Why did you clean the whole house, but not actually clean the toilet? Things like that. It's it gets frustrating at times for me because I feel like this idea that I don't belong to anyone but myself, but I don't love myself enough to accept myself has become this weird sort of caustic shell around me that doesn't allow me to really truly open up to very many people. I'm very open. I'll talk with about anybody about just about anything. When you start talking about how do you feel about it, I'm like, oh, like I'll tell you all about it, but I may never surrender that emotional part of it. And so it's been a limitation in my ability, I think, to go out and be more professionally successful. I feel personally successful. I have three good kids that are well adjusted. I can go out and I've met a wonderful woman that I'm starting to enjoy building a relationship with, and I feel very capable. But there are a lot of things in my life where I feel like that constant need to have more, know more, understand more is at some weird odds with the world's need for us to grow more, have more capital, have more, take a better vacation, put more stuff on Instagram. Like, I don't care about what the world cares about, and I've yet to reconcile those two things. Does that kind of make sense? Because I'm
To me, it does. And I also find it fascinating because, and again, this is purely anecdotal. This is an anecdotal conversation. I'm not a licensed practitioner, not therapist, or anything like that. Like when you say that, when you said all of that, like I sense that a portion of that, dare say a huge portion of that, is just a genuine desire to learn more. Like in a lot of ways, you're a scientist. You, like Robert Smith, you've fallen in love with figuring things out,
yeah.
right? And neuroplasticity, you just want your brain to be malleable and you want to learn. But then I feel like there is a portion of that that says, well, I want to learn these things because, like you mentioned a moment ago, my intelligence wasn't nurtured. And then from our prior conversation regarding intelligence in school, when compared with your counterparts, you felt like you didn't measure up. And it wasn't an issue of intelligence, but it was a focus thing, according to you,
hmm
that you were just unable to tap into a level of focus that you weren't unable to tap into. And you attributed this to ADHD. Is that
Some
correct?
of that, yeah. So I'm coming to this realization now that I have, if not a classically defined ADHD, I have a lot of the manifestations of it. Not all of them, but enough that I can look back through my childhood, through even my adult years, and go, yep, yeah, that totally tracks. And one of those things is I'm not a classroom person. Like, give me something hands on. My grandfather was a mechanic. and I can still visually describe to you the bottom of my 1983 Subaru station wagon because we
Right.
replaced those universal joint CV boots like 1,800 times. It feels like, right? I can look at everything. I can visually describe it to you, and I can like feel it in my hands. I can still go through and remember schematics from guitar amplifiers that I looked at 25 years ago when I was living in Europe, right? Traveling with a band because I'm online, man. I got time between gigs. Like, I'm going to go learn something. I want to learn how these amplifiers work. And I did. Nobody taught me that in a class, right? Yeah, I learned, I mean, my degree is in nonprofit and public management. So I could probably like go break up a trade union and rebuild it and, fight the government or something. But it's those things never really excited me. It felt like it was just a checkbox. And so that education was a checkbox, but learning was never something that was optional, right? And so every day I'm trying to learn something, whether that's from a person or from an organization or from a white paper or even talking to an AI. Like I had a fantastic conversation with Google AI driving over here on some things that I'm working on and bouncing it off of this piece of software somewhere in a rack in California or something. And there's this constant need to digest and consume more, and I guess add that or consume and then digest all of these things that make up our world. And that at times feels very isolating and very frustrating because I don't see maybe as many people as I would like doing the same thing. And so I kind of feel like people are walking around like they're in an India video. They're just kind of like they're at Moe's getting their burrito and they're just kind of chilled out and they're on their phone and they're not really having conversations with other people. They're not really experiencing the world. And for me, like I didn't feel like there was a substitute. Like I'm constantly trying to glean more out of whatever is happening at that moment in my life. And so I learned to kind of check out from the news and kind of check out from what's really happening in the larger world and dial into some deeper subjects because when I do get into it, that ADHD is very helpful. So I can go very deep on a conversation, go very deep on a topic, and then pop right back up and dive into whatever comes next. And the context switching is obviously there because again, ADHD. But as far as sitting down and saying, we're going to work on this project for 9 months, that's a struggle. But
Yeah.
if I look at it as we need to do this in 9 months and it's an 18-month project, then my brain goes, oh, yeah, we can do that. It's just something about that. And to that point, I had a career coach not that long ago. And she looked at me, and I don't like this analogy, but I'm going to use it. It was her analogy. She said, "You're like the Navy SEAL of consulting." I'm like, She's like, "No, no, no, don't misrepresent." She said, "You take the hardest jobs that you can find. You just parachute into the thing. You immediately take control of the situation. You solve the thing. You get out. You go on to the next thing." And I realized that the places I have been the happiest, the most successful, are not even like time limited. Like I didn't go in with, "You need to fix this in 3 months," but those are the things that made me the happiest because I go in and I can have, carte blanche to make change or to grow things or to reinvent processes or help people. It's always been within that frame for me is to help other people and bring my particular set of skills, right? And then go away because I don't want the gold watch. I don't want to sit and do the same thing for the next 25 years, right? I kind of constantly be in this state of metamorphosis for myself and learning. And it's like this reinforcement that just keeps going and it keeps me at the front of whatever's coming, but it doesn't always map well to people that need me to be there every day doing the same thing for them for the next 25 years. And so it kind of goes back to that educational thing. Like I am not the long slow and steady, tried and true kind of like persistence to get things done. I'm very famine or feast. It's boom or bust for me. So it's financially, in terms of my relationships, things like that. The only long-term real commitments that I can honestly say that I feel like I have not just participated in, but grown and continued to mature and deepen have been with my kids. And I mean, obviously, that should be the people that you spend that time with, right? Others, people come and go every 5 years. I think that's not just me, that's all of us, but I kind of expect it. And I get to a point where I want to speed run to the good parts. And sometimes I miss the honeymoon with people or with an organization, with whatever else, because I do dive right in and go as hard as I possibly can into whatever task is there and then go with whatever's next. And so it comes across as a little frenetic and people don't really understand it. And to your point, you talking about dancing last night, right? I'm in dance number one. I'm already on dance number six mentally. I'm like, oh, I just did that move. I can't do that again. maybe I can do it over here because they didn't see me. And it's just that's how my mind works. Is I'm always I'm not saying I'm trying to like think 3 steps ahead, but sometimes I can't stop, and it causes me to miss out what I'm doing in that very moment. I think that's why I missed a lot of my education because it didn't matter. I was always looking at what comes next and how can I be effective for what comes next.
And then I think it's the crisis and identity,
Hmm.
because at that point, that could conceivably be a fork in the road. And I can categorize this as ADHD, or I can categorize this as being highly efficient.
So not to sound like a total nerd, but I do have children. We've watched some of those Harry Potter movies. There's the one of the books. I don't remember which one it
We
was, but
love Harry Potter. We love Lord of the Rings. We love all that kind of
we
shit
love us
around
some
here.
Lord of the
Save
Rings. But
space.
but but I do love me some Lord of the Rings. I don't have to
Boom.
quote it because I will. Um, Hermione goes to like all these different classes at once because she gets a little thing that lets her be in a million places. I want that. Like I would love that. I'd love to have this conversation with you. I'd love to be over at the donut shop, get myself some sweet little treat. I'd love to be watching my kids right now, just hanging out with them and experiencing them. I'd love to be out on the mountain, right, and go for a walk over Kennesaw Mountain. I'm gonna be doing all these things at once. And I feel like there's just not ever enough time, and that kind of creates this analysis paralysis for what's important. And I've never had that in business. I've always been able to very clearly sit, listen to my stakeholders, walk away, build the thing, do the thing, grow the thing with the people, and then do that. Personally, never had it. Never had it in my life.
I don't see analysis paralysis of what's important. I see either an inability or an unwillingness to define what's important.
I agree with that. I totally agree with that.
And then to build the bridge to where you are, well, where you were semi, quasi presently, and then going all the way back. Like with class, like when we say under ADHD, I think that you were grossly understimulated in class.
Oh
Like
yeah.
speaking to you, like one can
Oh yeah.
easily deduce, and I know you. Like we hang out, we
Yeah.
dance, we have dinner. So I know you. Like you have
We dance with women.
with women.
I mean, we will dance together. It's just
Never,
qualifying. I don't know.
never. This shit is going. Okay, we do while paying, right? But we don't dance together. Like he has a partner,
He
I
won't
have a
have me.
partner, and we're doing the same
He won't,
moves
he won't
with
have
our
me.
partner together. I definitely will not have him. You gotta love this guy's personality. I love it. That's why I love you, right? I think they see right through it and they can tell how much I love you.
Appreciate it.
Secrets out, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, but I think anyone can deduce how intelligent you are. We were at dinner. We had a conversation. I was tossing around an idea that I was toying on,
Yeah.
right, about what I wanted to do with the podcast and take it to the digital space. And the way you just freaking deconstructed and reconstructed that thing in 15 minutes, like that's top tier intellect, right?
Thank
So
you.
it's not, and then when you look at the quality, even though you were in the Midwest, that's why I drew that
I
comparison
like that. I
earlier.
like you just dumbed down like a third of the country. That was nice.
I did.
Even though you were in the middle.
Holy fucking shit. Every day I'm becoming more and more of a Republican. I need to look at my friend group. I really but yeah, compulsory education in several regions of the country, one can make a compelling argument that it is inadequate and it doesn't
Hmm.
teach people to a become critical and reflexive thinkers, but also maximize a full utilization of their intellectual capacity. Um,
I think we've changed though, and I don't want to get
no, please
too
go ahead.
into that, but I mean, the entire purpose of schooling was to create citizens, right? It's to create little worker bees. I mean, that's what
Right,
it's become. And now, especially as AI is coming in, we don't need worker bees anymore,
right.
and the fewer people we have that can pull the levers and push the buttons, the better.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I mean, I don't think this is like the most sage thing ever, but one thing I realized with my kids over the summer is the more time you spend pushing a button on a screen now, the more time you're going to spend as an adult, right? So if you can get out right now as a child and learn the arts, right? Learn to sing or play an instrument or draw, paint, whatever, go out for walks and stimulate your brain in ways that are not just, TikTok and unboxing videos, right? The less time you're going to spend making spreadsheets or, pushing the proof or the point of sale thing at a gas station, you're just ringing up somebody's food, right? It's like our society is no longer geared toward producing the scientists the engineers, the next level thinkers. And I think it started before we were even born, right? I think there was something that after that baby boom, we just kind of went, holy crap, we got a bunch of people, we got a bunch of jobs, everything is good. We don't need to push farther. And once maybe the space race and the arms race, the
Yeah.
Cold War kind of ended, it just became unfettered capitalism. Let's push to the bottom. And that's one of the things that I'm really pushing my kids is to get your head out the device, look around the world. If you need to build something, but play with Legos or go for a walk or
Yeah.
meet the neighbors and go hang out in the neighborhood and meet people. And it's not something that's like I said, for me, I can sit and read all day long
Right.
and do nothing with it or do something big with it. A lot of people would probably feel the same way, but we read different things and we do different things based on what we consume.
Right.
And there are a lot of people that I'll see, I'll see somebody like you out just kind of jogging up and down the trail, and I'm like, I wish that was me, but I don't have the manifestation to go and change in that way. I think there are a lot of people that look at me and they're like, you do all these things. I wish I could do that. Well, you can. You just got to get up off the couch and go do it. You got to change those one or two things in your life. And to draw it back, I have looked at all these people that are great salespeople or great engineers or great, leaders of people. And I go, why can't I do that? Like I can do 80% of what they do innately, just with who I am. But I can't get to the next 10% by putting in the effort and the last 20% just because I'm not them, right? I'm never going to have their genius or their greatness to that in that respect. And it's frustrating to me. And so that's what you go back to like the the analysis paralysis. That's where I feel like my life has always been based on should, right? I should do this, not could do this, because I could go do anything. You could go to any of us could go do anything. I mean, don't be wrong, I'm not gonna like start for the Lakers next week, but there's some limitations, but I should do this based on where I've come from. And I've recently come to this idea that it's not about what I can do or what I should do. It's like what is possible from here. And so, what's possible from today? Because we can't go back 6 months. We don't know where we're going to be in 6 months. What can I do from right now in this moment? From right now in this moment, I can like flip over the table and be like, I'm done with this podcast and walk out and be angry. I'm not. I can go home. I can hang out with my kids. I can go to the mall. I can go for a walk. I can go back and work on some AI and work on some products for myself. There's so many things that I can do. Which one of those is probably the most feasible for my long-term benefit?
Which
Without
takes me back to
that's it. And I feel like a lot of times I sacrifice my short-term happiness for a long-term goal. But by doing that, I also sacrifice the long-term goal because I'm not happy enough to keep doing it. It's like
right
it's a
because
weird
we're
vicious
not
cycle.
absolutely, and because I think that we're not defining what's important, which will ultimately provide purpose,
Fair,
and in that purpose, you'll find that you are
fair
enough.
enough. Yeah,
So going back to making that correlation, that distinction, right? I don't think I think that it was gross understimulation in school, which I think in the software engineer career, I sort of see that, but I want to unpack that a little bit.
sure.
Like there's a with your intelligence, I can see why you're a software engineer. I can see why there's a portion of you that gravitated toward that found uh initial, what I would say, surface level joy in that.
Mm,
But getting to know you, I think that there's a larger portion of you that's softer science driven or oriented.
mhm.
I think that you're fascinated with the human condition. I think that you excelled as a software engineer in various projects. Like you said, yeah, when there were short time constraints, right? Because you can exercise your efficiency, intelligence, so on and so forth. But I also think that you excelled at certain various projects when there was a clear purpose defined, when you can see how this would help people, which would
Yes.
feed that portion of you
Yes.
that's so human
Yeah.
condition oriented. And conversely, when that wasn't there, that I won't even say exacerbated, it revealed
Yeah.
the crisis in
Yeah.
identity.
And to that point, so everything I have tried to do has come from this perspective of I love people. And honestly, at this point in my life, I can say I don't know that I actually love people. I love the idea of loving people, right? Because that's what we're supposed to want to do, right? You grow up in the church, you grow up in a close knit community, and I grew up in a town where everybody in my family lived within 20 minutes, right? So I had everybody around, aunts and uncles and cousins, oh my, right, all that kind of thing, and it was. it was always fascinating because I remember, like the Thanksgivings and the Christmases, and everybody comes over, and it was foundational, and I got to see those people every week. I grew up with four grandparents within 20 minutes, and I was always nurtured, but never really pushed, and that's kind of how I feel about it. And I've come to this place where that led me to believe that loving people and doing the best you can for people is important. And I could do more, so I wanted to do more. So when I build something, or when I think about, how a product should work, or a process, I've got more into process than product over the last couple of years. It's who's actually using this, and trying to be humane in the way that I want them to operate with the system. Let's call it the system. And so whether that's, you need to go take a learning class, like an online class, in order to get your certification so you can retain your job, whether it's an HR thing or whatever. Or I built a thing for Weather Channel when I was there that made the ad show up 1 second faster every time. Now, most people don't care because it's an ad on a web page. They don't care, but the advertiser cared. And over the course of 1 month, if you add up each one of those 1 seconds, it was like 56 years of aggregated time that I gave back. But I didn't look at it as I gave this advertiser additional eyeball time. I looked at it as these people don't have a weird little blank space at the bottom of their page,
Right.
and things just go faster. And so I'm always trying to optimize for the things that other people either don't see as problems, or they don't realize will be a problem for them in months or years or whatever else. And so that idea of constantly trying to find fault, and find, not fault, but find gaps, has given me sort of a well-rounded capacity to understand not just how to find them, but how to fill them, how to show them to others, how to build consensus around things. But it's never made me happy. I feel like I'm always looking for holes rather than ideation on what could possibly be. And that comes back to, again, that should, right? The fact that I'm even here today and having this conversation is because I trust you. I care about you. It's not so much
My
that
man.
that's it, honestly, because I'll sit and have these conversations privately, but the scariest thing for me is putting something out there and feeling intellectually deficient, or like emotionally deficient. Like, I'm pushing 50 years old, right? I should have some of the shit figured out, and I don't. So I can either accept that and realize that it's a growing experience, or I can feel less than, right? I can feel like either you are enough or you are not. And whatever I am has to be enough. So that's why I'm coming to this point of openness to speaking about it, and or just writing it down, right? Because I've always felt like I was around intelligent people. I was never as intelligent as them in their leisure domain. So maybe I wasn't good enough. And now it's become, no, you're good enough in like all these areas. And just because you're not hyper specialized in one doesn't mean that you don't have value across the board. And uh, I actually had the balls to say it in a job interview a couple of years ago. They were asking me, so what are you really good at? I'm like, I'm not a specialist, but what I do is special. Because, that's just is like, I bring the glue for the team, right? And so if you go back to like the high school, whatever else, if I'm not there, people notice. Like, even like, you probably on the same group chat with me for dance, right? Like, are you coming? I'm like, no, I can't come. I was out sick this week. People are like, oh,
It's catastrophic when you
yeah.
all just
Everybody
die.
just misses me. No, not because I'm good at what I do, because
You're special.
I bring something. We all are, but it's finally I'm at that point where I'm realizing. And again, I said I feel like I'm finally in a place where I have humans around me in all different capacities that love me, that care about me, that are willing to show it. And I've had that all my whole life, is people that care, but maybe didn't have the right tools to express it. And I finally feel like I'm in that kind of place. And it's not always super deep, but it's just enough to be like, hey, missed you this week. How you been? Or I know you've been struggling. How you doing with this? Or hey, you know what? I've been struggling. I need you to, buffer me a little bit. And so it's become a much more robust network, and that has kind of deflated the angst balloon, I guess, for lack of a better term, right? Everybody kind of carries that little, that little pillow around with them to kind of lay their head on when they don't feel right. And I feel like that's kind of gone. And I'm at a place where I'm happier than I've ever been. I'm probably facing bigger struggles in my life right now than what I ever have, but I'm happy. I'm confident in who I am, and I'm willing to finally put some of that out there, for right or for wrong, because I'm no better or worse than anybody else.
Absolutely. And I commend you for that.
Thank you.
Come into grips with parts of your personality that you would deem as deficient.
Ooh, you want to get right into that imposter syndrome?
Let's get right into it.
So, nerdy. Here we go. So you kind of gave a definition of imposter syndrome previously, and so imposter and impose come from the same word, right? And the idea being that you're an imposter is that you are imposing on someone else falsely. And that's literally taking someone else's time, energy, money, whatever, through fraud. And I think that's the interesting part of it is if I don't feel like I have the capacity to speak intelligently on a subject, I'm gonna keep my mouth shut. If I don't feel like I have the safety, this is not different than anybody else. If I don't have the safety to speak openly in a room, I'm not gonna be fully emotionally transparent. Like I'm very open, but there's things that still you just don't want to put out in the public. And so I don't find that I'm different than anybody else in that way. But the idea of being an imposter is that like you just don't belong in the room. Again, that goes back to having this sort of opsomath, polyglot kind of, I know a lot about a lot, but I don't know one thing super well. You want to talk macroeconomics? Let's talk macroeconomics. You want to talk about, kinesiology and swimming? Let's talk about that. You want to talk about tertiary chords and music? Great, let's go talk about those things. But if I go talk to a faculty member that teaches each of those things, I'm out of my depth and I feel stupid immediately because I can't have everything that they know. And I was recently blessed to meet a woman who's a college professor and has had some trauma through the courses that she taught and the critical reception from her local community. And it really caused me to look back. And I'm sitting here thinking, she's like, "Oh, have you read this? Have you read this? I just read this. I just read this." And I realized that I have come from a life of I can go through all of the schematics of, how to build a website and how to scale it out, how to do all these things, or how to, run a 1,500 person organization. But I'm not a scholar in the same way she is. Why am I comparing myself to a literal scholar whose job it is to understand this very specific portion of the humanities? Why do I feel less than when I didn't take her road, right? And so that's part of it is the imposter syndrome is not about who I am, it's about what I'm able to demonstrate. And so I don't feel that if I'm able to demonstrate knowledge or capacity, that I need to just shut the fuck up. And that's hard for me because again, ADHD, I want to talk, right? I want to find common ground with people. That's my Midwestern sensibility is we all got to get along and, maybe like the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. And so it's a weird kind of triangulation in every situation that I go into is how do I be me? How do I bring positive energy? And how do I show people appreciation and love, meet them at the highest level of wherever they are, and still be available for criticism, critique, growth, change, because I do want to learn and grow from these people. And it's so the imposter syndrome has impacted me negatively because not because I don't feel like I'm capable. I mean, sometimes I come across as too confident, too cocky, and maybe a little too capable for people. I know you like kind of looked over there, but yeah, I often feel like people look at me and they think I'm a blowhard, like I'm just always trying to be out in front of things. I don't see it that way. I see it more as I'm never going to know enough, and I have to know when enough is good enough for the situation and for the person that I'm talking to. And sometimes it's just I can relax, I can hang out on the couch and just be and just exist. And sometimes I really got to get out and push. And I never am really great at knowing when that situation is going to change.
You were
I
an athlete in school, right?
I was. So I grew up swimming, but played tennis and all the things,
And you competed.
Yeah, yeah. I competed with guys that were twice my size. I was tiny. God, high school. I graduated. I was barely 5 feet tall and 100 pounds. And one of the guys I swam against was 6'8". So he's gonna win every time. Every time he won every time, and all I could do to hope was like make it interesting. And yeah, I had fun with it, but I always knew that like this is not gonna be my life. I never had any, you know, uh, no delusions of grandeur. I guess is the nice way to say it. I competed because I wanted to compete and see what I could do, and that translated over to intellectual capacity and trying to figure out what can I learn, what can I show, and not necessarily have to demonstrate all of it because there's always gonna be somebody that's miles ahead of you. Somebody's always gonna win because you just can't do that. You can't keep up with everybody. But I get where you're going with that. I feel the same way now that I did as a 15-year-old, 16-year-old. I can feel like I'm constantly fighting somebody that like literally hold the ball up over my head. You're like, ha ha ha, you're never getting the rebound again. It's just it's one of those things. And I feel that way about just about everybody, every person that I meet, because everyone has something that they're excellent at. And I want to meet them at the peak of their excellence. And I feel like I've never been able to really do that. And a lot of people will also hide away what they're excellent at if it's not in that moment where they feel safe demonstrating it. So if that's not in their workplace, or if they're baking whatever their specialty is or whatever those things are, they don't feel 100% comfortable, they're not going to reveal it to you. I feel like I'm constantly trying to draw that out.
As much as you loved swimming, how much as you committed to it, did it ever irk you that you weren't necessarily given the physical attributes that your opponents were given? And it's like, damn, if I were just a little taller and I could, the way that I swim and as much as I put into it, the gumption, because this is the only reason why I'm losing. I'm just curious.
Oh no, that's the only reason I lost. No, I mean, I had fun with it. I mean, I didn't hit the weight room every 5 minutes to, I didn't. Some people like there's a Michael Phelps, like there's a body that's made for that. I was not that body, but also I didn't love it enough to make it my thing. Like I've never loved anything enough to make it my only thing. I sit there and I see you got a guitar here. I got a guitar sits right next to my desk. I don't play it. I got another one that sits right next to my bed. I don't play it. I used to. I traveled. I played in a band and toured. I don't play it anymore. I don't love it the way that I used to. And I don't think there's anything that I am that committed and focused on that I want to do to the exclusion of all other things. And again, I think that kind of comes back to this idea that, well, if I do well enough in a bunch of things, then I don't have to fail at one thing because somebody was better than me at that thing. Right. So I could always justify it in my mind, like, okay, well, yeah, that dude's a foot and a half taller than me. He's going to beat me, but I can go play tennis and he doesn't. Or I can play piano and he doesn't. Or I can do this, or I can do this, I can do this. And it was like by stacking all these different capabilities, I found a parity with that person's specific excellence. That, you know what I'm saying? So there was
Absolutely.
this idea, and I think that sort of was nurtured or was required by that ADHD, you know, higher intelligence, but not necessarily beneficial to it. Where it said, yes, you go do these things, go do more things, go do more things, go do more things. And then it became, now I need to do those things, it became part of my person. And I don't know how I necessarily feel about that because it's hard to turn off. Like I'll watch a video on, something on gardening on YouTube. I just, got into plants and, house plants and things a couple of years ago. And then all of a sudden I'll be like, I want to build an earth ship that's like a greenhouse with a container house inside of it and live on a mountainside in Nevada, right? Yeah, I can see Vinny's already like shaking his head, right? So
Right up his alley.
exactly. So there's a part of me, and I'm like, I'm thinking about, okay, how do I draw in fresh air? How do I handle louvers? Like, okay, now I want 48-volt lighting. Okay, I can get a rack mount to do that. I can control all of that. So my brain goes to like these massive extrapolations of all the things that I could do. And then I have to dial it back to like, maybe instead we should just get another pothos and stick it on the wall, right? And just like put it up on the mantle. I like, let's start small. And I can go to these massive visions that I have no earthly way to execute, but I'll find a way to get it done. And it's that way with everything. And there's this, I explained it to a friend the other day. There's this, I'm not a big Marvel or whatever. I didn't grow up with comics, but somebody posted this, I think it was on Reddit. There's this like Captain America. They're asking like, how do you throw the shield and how do you know all this stuff? And he's like, I just see things faster. And I think that's probably the best way to encapsulate how I feel about who I am is I'm not better than anybody else. I'm certainly not. There's a lot of things I'm really deficient at. And I don't know that I'm ever going to be better than anybody else, but I feel like I put the pieces together faster. And like you see these kids with the Rubik's cubes. I feel like I can look at it and analyze the problem. I can't do the Rubik's cube, but I can do that with so many things that it feels frustrating that I can't do that with my day to day. So it's like either I don't care enough about myself or I don't care enough about how I'm perceived by others to actually put the effort in to make that happen on a daily basis. And I have to be task focused or I have to be like project or goal focused, or I need to find a way to take joy in what I consider deficiency, which is still probably excellent by most people's standards, right?
Midwest conservative upbringing, Christian
Mhm.
values, turned away from faith. Is that correct or not?
Yeah, yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Um, so my dad still goes to a very conservative church. Not they're not hyper conservative, but they still walk in and they like hit the pitch pipe and sing like it's 1857, right? Four-part harmony out of a hymnal. And there's some good folks, some loving folks in there. And I had an opportunity to go with my grandparents and go to something a little bit more, I was more progressive, but definitely still not progressive, and grow into that. And I saw people's just people, right? And belonging to a body or clinging to an ethos or a worldview or a religion or whatever may change a person. It may not, right? And I get some people will have like a prison epiphany, right? They have their salvation. Some people will come to a point of absolute destitution, and they'll find whatever karma or Jesus or whatever works for them. And some people will just not. And I wonder how much of that is based around who they are, their situation, what they require in that moment. And my mom, in my lifetime, I don't think she's ever been back to the church she was married in. And I won't get into all of that, but she had some issues with it. And she, for the most of her life, she might not like hearing this if she ever watches it, would describe a lot of Christians, not all of them, but most of them as being hypocritical. And I don't think it's I don't think it's hypocrisy. I think it's just humanity, right? We can't all live to that level at all times, right? It's aspirational. And for me, what I think led to me leaving religion, organized religion, but specifically, within the Christian church, is I was a missionary. When I say I went to Europe and played in a band, like I traveled, I put my name out there, and I always felt a little icky going to somebody else's house and telling them how they should live because I definitely didn't have it. I still don't have it right. And the idea that we could talk about grace and faith doesn't bother me. And I still believe that there's something out there in the world. Like there are too many. There's not enough coincidences in the world to explain some of the things I've experienced. But the idea that we have weaponized so many things in Christianity to justify bad humanity, and you can take that from slavery, and you can say like Zionism right now. There's a different manifestation of that, and like American Zionism, contributing to that. I don't want to delve into the politics of it, but we tend to be tribal more than individual. And I believe that we can love an individual, right? And every individual is worth love, and we can find a common ground. It's not easy to do if you immediately layer that overall um, that structure on top of it. And I never found that I really needed religion to give me morality, right? And I can find that from the people that I grew up with that had it, didn't have it, displayed it, didn't display it, whatever. And there's just an innate sense of an ethos, right? And there were good people before Jesus came along, before Muhammad came along, right? Before Confucius came along. I think there's plenty that we can learn, but I've got to this point where I don't feel like my life is empowered by having a daily ritual or a community that provides that sort of structure for me. And at the end of the day, I mean, I kind of look at all this as being happenstance more than divine plan. And you know, I've definitely been the type to get on my knees and pray and feel good about it, and also at times feel weird about it and feel very alone as a result. And I've kind of come to the opinion that everything I do is on me, even the bad things in my life. And I'm very privileged. I'm incredibly privileged. They all come down to my choices, right? And I have got to live with those choices, nothing else. The day that I'm gone, I'm gone. And so my only goal right now is not to make to find a seat in heaven or to come back as something better than a worm, but it's right now my only goal and mission is to provide a better life for my children so that they can flourish and become the best people that they can be.
That's a perfect segue to my question. You
I
never
know.
felt, because you're amazing. This is that intelligence you were talking about. You never felt like an imposter, or you never experienced imposter syndrome as a father.
Probably the opposite. Like some days I feel like I'm too overconfident in this, which it leads to its own sort of scariness, right? Because you're like,
Hmm.
am I messing my kids up by being so confident about this? I feel like I have had a lot of years to really sit and evaluate myself, my ex-wife, my former partner, my parents, my brother, and his girlfriend, and things like that, and start to understand people. And then just everyone else in the world. I've traveled all over the world. I've seen people from every race and culture and religion and everything else. And I've come to this place that I break it down for my kids very simply. Like, there's only three things that I ask of you, and I can't put anything on you. Like, you're going to live your own life, but don't be an asshole. Don't get pregnant. Even if you think you're ready, like, wait 2 years, right? And then just be the best you that you can be. Because the world doesn't care what you are, it just needs you to be you. And so it's funny as I say that because I'm trying to accept that the world needs me or wants me, even with my brokenness, even with my stubbornness, even with my ego sometimes. I don't feel wanted or needed. And yet I'm telling them at the same time, the world wants you and needs you and appreciates you however you come. And so I don't have any control over any of that. All I can do is try and reframe for them and dial back some of that teenage angst, right? I got two daughters and a son. So the girls are hitting that kind of teenage years kind of thing, and they're looking at what they want to do with their life. And trying to explain that in the end, the only thing that matters is your sense of self-worth and happiness. And it's the only thing you can really not even control, but control for, I guess.
And lastly, self-deprecating behavior, self-deprecating talk.
I've thought about this one quite a bit. So and we talked about this obviously, but if you feel like you're not supposed to be in the room, then you question, why am I here? And I'll give you an example. So I went to work for IBM, and they kind of pitched the job to me as maintaining teams, like running large teams for implementing their products for their customers. And so I get there and I realize I'm in New York, and I'm sitting with my boss and one of my peers and my boss's boss. We're sitting at this little restaurant in the East Village, and I realize I've bitten off way more than I can chew, because it's not going to be, hey, you got to you got to run these teams of people. It's, we need you to go sell the work, and you're going to have to like be cold knocking these doors. And they gave me some options for the accounts that I wanted to take, and I could take either one little small account that had never bought anything, four really big accounts that we all know the names of that would typically buy tens of millions of dollars every year. So naturally, I'm going to take the big ones, right? I'm going to take the ones like that's simple math, right? Yeah. And then I go back to the hotel room, and I had the first panic attack. I won't say I've had another one, but I'm not open. I have another one, but I had my first panic attack. And that's the only way I can describe it. And I called a friend of mine who's been in sales for years, and he said, look, how many languages do you know? I'm like, English. Really? Like restaurant Spanish? Like, what do you want me to say? He's like, no, no, no. How many software languages? And I said, okay, I get where you're going with this. He said, what did it take to learn that? Well, you have to learn like the grammar, the syntax, the morphology. You got to figure out how words go together, phrases. He says, think about what they just said to you and how you can grow into that space. And I realized that my negative self-talk came out of that imposter syndrome because I didn't feel like I belonged in the room. And therefore it became, well, you're not good enough to be here. It became not just, you're not good enough to be here, you're stupid. Like, you don't know this stuff. Like, you didn't study hard enough in school. You didn't pay attention. You don't deserve to be here. It's not it's not so much you're wrong for thinking this, it's you don't deserve any of this. And I was ready to quit. I was ready to just cash it in and be like, I'm done. I'm done. Like, before it even starts. And I had to backtrack really hardcore. And I really want to say thank you to Nick for that one. But I had to really backtrack that one and realize that what I brought was different on purpose. They wanted something different. And I've had that. I've had some places where I've been flown out to interviews, and I sit in a room of like five other guys that are completely different from me. And I asked, why am I here? I've asked that of like partners I'm out on a date with, like, why am I here? What do you want? What do you see? And they kind of look at me funny. I'm like, what do you get? What are you getting out of this? Because I don't always see it. And so the self-deprecating talk is not, I'm not good enough. It's, I don't know enough to control the situation, to contribute effectively, or to say the right thing. And there's honestly, I could have that today. I just kind of decided coming in today, I'm gonna talk about me. And if I can't talk about myself, then what can I really talk about, right? And so it's interesting because that negative self-talk becomes self-reinforcing, and that becomes your patterns. So you have your cognition of uh, the idea that, like, you have the imposter syndrome. Even if you recognize that you're in it, you can still kind of muddle through it and be like, well, I don't know enough, but I know enough to realize I can accept where I am right now. It's kind of like that Dunning-Kruger effect. If you realize that you know enough, okay, well, you're in the room on purpose, right? They want you here. But if you get into the negative self-talk, that it's not just self-deprecation, it will shake you down to your core of existence. And you can be the smartest person in the room and feel like a complete idiot, feel worthless. You can be standing up on giving your TED talk and look out in the audience and see 1,000 people. I'm not giving a TED talk, but you can look out, you can give 1,000 people, and they're like, this guy's an idiot. They can be laughing at your jokes, they can be clapping along, like you see the heads bobbing up and down. And if you don't believe your press, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the crowd says. You're going to let yourself down. And going back, I have done some interesting things that I don't believe define me in the way that I see myself defined, right? So I have a patent for something that I came up with Weather Channel. I've played on stage for 50,000 people. I've run around with a guitar like an idiot with a big head on a big old 40-foot screen, looking out, sea of people screaming. And I look back at that and I'm like, no, that was just opportunity. I was just in the right place at the right time. Oh, fucking, I earned that. I earned that. I worked hard for that. And I've learned to not just give myself the little like Stuart Smalley pep talk because you're good enough, that kind of stuff, but to accept that it's okay to be a little broken. It's going to be a lot broken. It's okay to be starting over. It's okay to be in a rebuilding year, right? I was wearing my Indiana shirt today for my Hoosiers, right? Grew up in Bloomington with the IU, #2 football in the nation right now,
Boom.
right? I'm totally on the bandwagon, right? I've not watched them forever and ever and ever because they were bad. They were bad. They're comically bad. And that's okay to be comically bad. You're going to get your day in the sun and just make the most of that time, but also hear that self-talk and realize nobody else is saying it about you. It's just you feeling inadequate for no reason. People around you, if they love you, they care about you, they're still there. If they didn't love you, they wouldn't be around. They got other people to be around. They got other things to do. When they show up, when you're down, when you're up, if they're not just riding the bus, but they're there for all those years doing that work for you, then you need to understand that your self-talk is just false. And that's why I'm slowly trying to overcome and understand that the things that I say are always going to be harder on me than anything anyone else could ever say. I'm always going to be my worst critic and just to an exponential scale worse than anybody else will ever be. And so that's why I have to realize I deserve to be in the room. I deserve to have the conversations. I deserve to be appreciated and I deserve to be loved and to love myself. And I don't necessarily know what I'm going to do with that in this moment, but I know that I'm set up for whatever comes next. I will be able to appreciate it more deeply and more fully and respect myself going forward. And you mentioned the point about being a parent. That's one thing I've never felt less qualified or less anything. I've always felt like I've been innately capable of growing my children and preparing them for this world because I want them to never feel the things that I have felt. They're going to have their own things, but I want them to never feel the way that I have felt around some things. My parents always said, we work so hard so that you don't have to. And that was literally go to work every day, bust your ass. And I look at it as like an emotional, intellectual labor. So my kids can take that knowledge if they will accept it, and they're kids, so they don't always accept it. But trying to implant that upon them so that they can take that and kind of grow from it. And that comes back to like my negative self talk has to stop. Because if I think for a minute I'm not a good father, then I'm not, right? If I think I'm not a good employee, I'm not. If I think I'm not a good friend, I'm not. Then it just becomes a question of, well, why do you feel that way? What do you need to do to get back to feeling better about it or believing yourself about it? Because you probably already are. And I think that's a lot of things where a lot of people withdraw because they don't feel like they're enough. I'm starting to realize I'm enough. I'm enough, right? So yeah, right. So it's but some of these things they do matter, right? And it's just kind of growing that sense of self that allows you to believe not necessarily your own press, but at least your own white paper, right? This is where I'm going. This is where I'm headed toward. This is what I'm going to do in my life. This is what the product is supposed to be. And sometimes it doesn't measure up, and okay, so you reframe a little bit. But you got to have to your point, you got to have a vision for who you are and who you want to be, and understand the gap. And I think that goes back to my thought of what can I do from here. It's not what's should or could. It's just what is practical what makes the most sense, how are you going to impact your other people and your own life today, next week, and with my kids for the rest of theirs, hopefully, the rest of their lives.
And to walk it all the way back to the beginning, the
Hmm.
development now of these relationships, these interpersonal relationships in your life, you're showing up as this Kyle consistently. And those relationships are fruitful, as how you described it, correct?
They are, and you know, I'm not going to say like you only get one chance to make that first impression. You do, but we are all such layers, upon layers, as humans, and personalities, and an ethos, and the way you live, just all those things come together. And I'm at this point where I realize that I have got to accept and enjoy who I am, and not just tolerate it, and not just say, well, I didn't get this because XYZ. It's never about my circumstances. In my head, it's always been about my person, about my capability, about my desire to do things. And I'm just learning to let so much go. I'm learning to include the people that really are going to be there for the ride, and let everybody else just kind of ask questions like, the hell's that all about? Leave them with a smile, but like, I want to be a whirlwind in people's lives. I want to come in and, like, give them something exciting, but positive. Maybe whirlwind's probably not the right example. They're a little destructive, but I want to be able to come in and be a bright light for people. And I realize that my value is not going to be in getting that gold watch in a relationship, in a partnership, in a business. It's be bright, be bright, be audible, that sort of thing, and bring a positive energy, because that's what I can do all day long. And if I can continue to do that for people, that gives me value. That's naturally who I am. Why not? Um, and so then the self talk goes away, because I'm not going to a certain depth with people where I need to, I won't say be transparent with them, because I feel like I'm transparent with about everybody, where I don't need to take into consideration their long term needs and goals, and like the rest of their life, if I can provide them with a moment, right? That's human and that's enjoyable, and that kind of transcends something that either one of us would have had otherwise. It's just part of getting out of my own way. Just accept who you are, and move forward. And if I can bring my energy to people, okay, good. And if I don't get that opportunity a second time, well, it's just not my people. And that's how you got to look at it. And not everybody's going to love you. You're not going to be everybody's cup of tea. So I'm sure for some people I'm gasoline, but that's acceptable too.
It's interesting that you know, self-deprecating behavior. It's a very tricky thing because, especially in relationships, because initially it gives the illusion of humility. This
Mm,
person is in tune with themselves. They know their shortcomings. They know this, they know that, they know that they don't measure up in this area, right? But it's in its consistent expression where it rears its ugly face. And our inner critic, our thoughts, right, shape our belief systems, which ultimately shape our lives. And Joe Dispenza said it best. People don't see things the way that they are; they see things the way that they are. So literally, the world that we see and interact with from that standpoint is literally just a mirror of what we are internally. And coming to that realization initially is cathartic, it's jarring, it can be
yep.
very fucking scary, right? But that's also very fascinating, right? Particularly when one realizes, well, listen, I am the sole orchestrator of this thing. And if I don't like this thing, then I can simply change it.
Mhm.
And that's when we realize, okay, we have to do battle with the inner critic. But then also stripping down the inner critic and understanding that your inner critic, it's a betrayal in a sense. See, initially your inner critic starts out as your friend. It's your saving
Mhm.
grace, right? Like
Yep.
you experience mild trauma or severe trauma, whatever it is, right? And then your inner critic tells you to back into a shell, so it's protective
Sure.
in nature initially, right? But then as we continue to grow, shape, formulate our lives, that protection becomes a betrayal,
Mhm.
right? Because again, the way that we view life that mirror, our inner critic is showing us, you see, this happened, right? And now this is going to reinforce
Hmm.
what I told you all these many years ago,
Well, the
right?
shell wants to protect itself.
Precisely. Exactly. And it's almost parasitic in nature, right?
Yeah.
Now, how to deal with that? In my journey, I'm learning that isolation is a crucial, critical component of that.
Hmm.
Like you and I, like as far as intellect. So like I can tell you all of the things that are wrong with me, right? I can tell you step by step. I can recount it for you, right? And I can do it in such a way that would give you the illusion that, man, this guy really knows what the fuck he's talking about. He's in tune with himself. He knows it, right? No, but that's just a regurgitation, right? And I
Right.
can do that in a
Right.
fancy way, right? But I need to sit in contemplation with that, right? In isolation so that I can get to the source of what produced this, right? I can begin to identify and acclimate myself with the subsequent emotions that I
Hmm.
feel in that isolation period. And then what we find is, see, isolation isn't peaceful. See, isolation is going to war with yourself. Isolation, your emotions are screaming because you are looking for stimulus,
Yeah.
right? Because it's showing you, it's revealing that mirror. You're seeing your true self, right? And all of your deficiency, right? And you're looking for any type of stimulation to run away from that, right? But if we can get to the point to where we can sit in that, right? First, not react to the emotion, not react to that feeling like crap or feeling like shit feeling that we get as a result of recounting what it is that we're recounting
Yep.
and then feeling the correlating emotion, right? And we can get to the point to where we can just observe that,
Hmm. Agreed.
right? Because again, once you remove the emotion from it, then that dirty lens that we were seeing life through is non-existent at that
Yeah.
point. Now we're seeing what really and truly transpired, right? Which is an introduction to authenticity, right? Like I think, listening to your story, I think now your relationships are fruitful because you have a really good understanding of who you are. I think I do as well. And I think my relationships are doing the exact same thing. I experienced what you experienced growing up in my formative years with my peer group. Kind of like you, I would bounce around. Hey, we can talk about this. We can talk about that. We can talk about this. But I didn't feel like I was myself,
Hmm.
right? Now, here's the confusing thing, right? A lot of the things that I was expressing in each of those respective environments were, I believe, and still believe, were realistic extensions of who I am.
Sure. Agreed.
But
It's an
it,
expression of personality.
it's an expression of personality.
Right.
But I didn't bridge those things. And it took me a
Agreed.
while to realize the only way to bridge the bridge itself is constructed with authenticity. It is
That's
100% my responsibility in all situations, especially in relationships with myself, and then ultimately
Mhm.
with others, to show up as my true and authentic self.
Agreed.
Showing up as my true and authentic self. And then, like you said a moment ago, if it's for you, it's for you.
Yeah.
If it's not, it's not. Because when I show up that way and then I begin doing this work, then the illusions are ripped away, right? Like all the fig leaves are
Hmm.
removed. And then I really see the truth. Well, no, it's not that I don't measure up with you, right? We're all going through this shit, right? We all don't have it figured out, man. Like, yeah, you might be proficient at this one thing, right? And that's fantastic. That's great. But there are several areas in your life that aren't so great, right? And there are varying degrees of dysfunction. And noting that is not a comparison thing because
Sure.
comparison is the thief of all joy. What it is, it's a realization mechanism to realize, hey, that's just fucking life. That's life.
Yeah.
And you know what? I don't want to have it all figured out, right? Because when I find my purpose, going back to defining my why, my reason,
Hmm.
right? Like take this podcast, for instance. So all of my shortcomings, all of my deficiencies, guess what? on the other side of the coin now become my credibility.
Sure.
It becomes my credentials,
Exactly.
right? So I can tell you about this thing, not just from theory, not just from reading this book. This is practical application. This is my real life, my negative self talk, right? The one place that you're 100% confident in is in the rearing and raising of your children.
Hmm.
Like you said yourself, you know what? It's literally the complete opposite. Like I'm overly confident in this thing, right? And that's a beautiful example because Jordan Peterson talks about this. He says, listen, talk to yourself as if you're talking to someone that you actually love.
Hmm.
Like, think about it. Like, it could be a child, it could be a good friend, right? They're going through a breakup. You give the best advice, right? Like, you might be going through a shitty time. Like, life might be running you through the ringer,
Yep.
but you're going to give grade A solid advice. You should do this, you should do that, you should do that. And then you know what? I'm going to be there for you, right? I don't
Hmm.
care what that is. You're my friend. I'm there for you to the end. I don't give a shit about it. I'm your ride or die. I'm right
Yep.
there. You know what? That's bullshit. You can do anything, but we won't dare talk to ourselves that
Ah, agreed.
way, right?
Agreed.
And that goes back to it. We have to realize, listen, I am enough. I have the right to be my greatest self despite any previous shortcomings.
I would agree to your point about finding that why. I feel like I'm always in neutral, waiting for that one thing that's going to define my life. Whether that's professionally or whether that's personally or whatever that is. And I guess that's the point of having three kids. Maybe that's not my why, but that's the closest thing I've come to, and that's why I'm so confident about it. And maybe the realization I've had over the last few years is that my why isn't a deep thing. Maybe it is a very broad surface to be that jack of all trades that kind of does everything and fills the gaps. And I don't feel less than as a result of that. I still feel that imposter syndrome in so many of those areas because I don't have the depth that people are going to have. But if I can bring an equal or higher level to those that don't have that particular knowledge or that particular capability, I'm learning to accept that. Maybe that is my why. And I'm not there yet. But I think it's interesting that, we look for purpose. And sometimes purpose just is who we are, right? And it doesn't have to be something that we seek or something that we try to build for ourselves. And, I wake up every morning and it's taken me a lot of years to get excited about work, a lot of years. And I'd say the last time I was excited was when I was actually writing code every day or when I was taking care of people because it was a new manifestation of how can I solve problems, right? And really that's what it comes down to is how can I solve problems for others? How can I have that wide breadth of knowledge to draw from, to your point, all of the intangibles, all of the non-functional requirements that make solving that requirement, right? And so it's an interesting blend on that because I don't always have the right answers. And I know that I'm not going to have the right answers. And to your point, if I found everything, if I knew everything, I'd be bored. But there's something about having the hunger for knowing it that keeps me going. And I know that I don't have the right answers for my kids. I know that I'm probably doing as much damage as anybody else is in their life, maybe more. But I'm trying to impress upon them that they are loved and that they may not be fully understood, but that's up to them to choose if they want to be understood. And then give them the best resources that they can to be effective and efficient in their lives so that they can live and be the best person that they can be for themselves. So it's funny that you bring that up because I don't know that I have a why. And I don't know that I necessarily want to find one or need one. Maybe my why is just filling the gaps for everybody else. I don't know. Maybe I get one someday.
What I will say is this for me, my why was not happenstance. It wasn't something that just fell into my lap. And as a result of that, I truly believe for everyone, I don't think that it's something that I think that if I quantify it,
Hmm.
an overwhelming percentage would support the fact that your why isn't going to just fall into your lap for 90% of people.
Absolutely.
So I believe that for me. And it came from a plot, the practical application. It came from my lowest point, right? Which for a long time was an ugly period. And then I realized, man, rock bottom and at being at your lowest is a really beautiful place because it's defining. And
It is.
then, growing from that, going on that journey, right? That healing journey, and still on that journey because it's a journey and not a destination. And then coming to saying, having an idea as a result of being on that journey. Well, you know what? When I was, going through my journey and I, as a black man, I wanted to talk to a certain person, right? That looked a certain type of way. I couldn't
Mhm.
find that. You know what? Let me create something.
Yeah.
Bam. And then when I started, it really sucked. Camera quality was horrible, sound quality was
We'll
horrible.
have to
I
learn.
would record
Yeah.
episodes on lunch, sometimes a little over lunch, right? It'd be like 2, 3 hours. I'm supposed to be working, right? But I felt passionate about it. I didn't know what it was going to become. I still didn't know what it was going to become. I still don't know what it's going to become. But I know how I feel as a result of doing it. And that feeling is absent, any type of personal gain, right?
Yes.
I didn't like the way that I looked. This is just me at the time, right? So, you know what? I'm really going to commit to this thing. I have to have an honest conversation with myself and say, you know what? I've been on this fitness roller coaster so many times in my life,
Hmm.
right? And it was the arrogance. I really didn't want to fully commit to it. I struggled in the discipline area, right?
Yep.
And I said, you know what? God damn it, this time that's not going to happen. So those two examples for me I use to say in learning on the journey, it's not what you become, it's who you become,
Hmm.
right? So becoming for me the person that will follow through, becoming the person, stepping into the sheath of a purpose driven, oriented person. And in doing that, that's helped me discover why in so many areas of my life, right? Why is like a filtering process. What is it?
I've been so good at doing that for everybody else.
I know.
Never been good at doing that for myself.
And that's why I said it the way that I
I
did and
know.
use me as the first
I
person
know.
so that you'd come to that realization.
And that's part of it, right? Is at what point am I enough?
And
At,
that's why I also said, see, we can recount intelligently. Oh, this is what happened, that is what happened, and that is what happened. But true cathartic change is in the isolation, it's in the contemplation that isolation ultimately
hmm.
produces, providing one is strong enough to sift through the storms of isolation.
Yeah. It's not enough to buy the rack and the weights, though. Sometimes you have to actually
Sometimes it
lift the
is.
bar. It's true.
What's the name of that book? Holy shit. Atomic Habits,
Yeah.
James Clear.
Yeah.
1% better every day. The
Yeah.
runner, he puts the shoes in front of the door,
Yeah.
right? Doesn't touch them, but he puts the shoes in
Yep.
front of the door. He's shaping and curating his environment. See, that's what people don't realize. That's what the process looks like.
Yep.
The process looks like, and it's different for everybody, but it's the same circumference, but the pizza slice is different. That's the only change, right? So putting the shoes by the front of the door, not touching them for 2 weeks, going to train the next day, training the next day after that, falling off, having pizza,
Hmm.
feeling like shit,
Yep.
getting back on the that is what the process looks like.
Yep.
And then what happens is you find your stride, you find your string of consistency. And then you know what? You fall off again. And then you feel like crap, right?
Yep.
But your refractory period, although unbeknownst to you in the time, you realize it in retrospect, is actually shorter,
Oh, of course.
right? So then you get back on the bandwagon. You say you're going to do it again, and then you feel like shit because you stopped and you remember what day one felt like. And now I'm right back at day one, and now I feel like shit. But that is what the process is. And then you
Hmm.
find another string where you just hit your stride, and you're months in, and you're months in, and you're months in, and then you fall off, and then you feel like crap. But you have a different type of conversation with yourself, and you
Hmm.
say, you know what? This just doesn't identify with me anymore. Then you look in the mirror, right? And you do a double take because you even look like someone that's different. You look like someone that's no longer in alignment with the limited beliefs and behaviors that you were with before. And that's when true cathartic change really happens. But it's still a journey because the person that you were is still right there waiting in the wind for you to slip up. Just like
Yep.
person that you have become was right there when you were the person that you were, egging you on to get your shit together.
Yep.
It's always you versus you. But again, that's what the process looks like. And people run from that process. But the change that you're looking for, the answers to the questions that you're answering, sorry to tell you, friend, you're not going to find them anywhere else.
You're not gonna find them in front of a TV or a tablet or anything else. No, you gotta actually do the work.
Got to do the work.
Gotta do the work.
But you're doing the work. I see your process.
I wish I could quit doing the work and just make it. Like I said, I don't know that I
Where's
want to
the
be a
fun in
butterfly.
that?
I'm in the chrysalis, man. I mean, there's more metamorphosis happening. I just,
Where's the fun in that?
yeah,
You remember the movie Good Will Hunting?
I sure do.
When Robin Williams was talking to Matt Damon, he was talking about his wife and about the farting and all that. He was like,
Hmm.
"Oh man, it's the good stuff."
It is the good stuff.
But when you look back on it, right, like yeah, like all of my fuck ups, like that's the good stuff. Those little
Yeah,
idiosyncrasies that make me me, and the experiences that we can sit back and laugh about and have a beer and talk of. That's the good shit.
I would agree.
You don't want to skip that process, even though it sucks in the moment.
Oh, it's got to happen. It's just like at some point, I'm not afraid of what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah,
Because again, I've been privileged. Like life, like the universe, God, whatever you want to say, things have just revealed themselves to me, and I've always gotten where I needed to be. And you can always look back through hindsight and understand, what that change did for you.
absolutely.
Living in it is tough. Wanting to live in it is tough. It's that Navy SEAL mentality. Like, this sucks. I love how much this sucks. Right? And you have to understand and expect that, no growth and change is going to happen without pain. Even if, again, going from being 5 feet tall to 5'7" in basically a year. Yeah, everything hurt because you're suddenly 20% larger. It's just a thing, right? I went from such a small physical person to whatever I am now. And I've done the same thing mentally, intellectually, emotionally, dozens of times. I feel like I do it every day now, to where it's just become, okay, let's just pencil it in Tuesday, 9:30 to 9:45. Like, all right, undergrow massive growth, right? And it's just a weird thing where I've learned to embrace the suck. And I've started to enjoy the process more than the outcome of it. But I don't know that I want to live in process. Like, I want to get to a point where I can say, I am now enough. I still struggle with that every day, but I think what I am becoming is enough, or where I have come from is enough, is good enough for me right now. Right?
I love that for you, man. And I'm glad that we're becoming friends.
Yeah.
And I look forward to your journey. And with that being said, big time, I am so glad
Thank you so much.
that you came today, man. That was
Appreciate
a
it.
delightful conversation. You got anything that you want to shout out? Anyone you want to shout out?
Yeah, I love my kids, Claire, Charlotte, Henry. Love you guys. Can't wait to see the people that you become. And thank you to friends and family that have been so supportive for years, days, months, and continue to love me despite all the things I tell myself that I am not. So that's it.
Imposter syndrome, a psychological disorder where we feel like we are unworthy of accomplishments and a sickness that we think that ultimately someone is going to discover that we are unworthy. If we examine our lives, the majority of us will see that that's actually something that a great many of us struggle with. Let's try to identify that, and then hopefully we can put forth measures individually to reveal that, counteract that, so on and so forth. Please continue to tune in and we'll talk more about that. And hopefully we'll figure this thing out together. If you found value here, and it's my sincere hope that you did, then please comment, like, subscribe. Follow the You versus You podcast on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And keep checking me out, and we'll keep busting this thing down. Peace.
It's you versus you.